Health systems, the highly mobilized environments on which we are so dependent. Once we fall ill or injure ourselves, but they are not bulletproof. 2020 was the start of what showed us how fragile and human those systems are. When the COVID pandemic hit, our healthcare systems worldwide were not designed to deal with this crisis. An unpredictable, large-scale health challenge that requires immediate mobilization of resources and affects every and each one of us. Nowadays, healthcare is facing two collateral issues. The first issue, physical and mental exhaustion of the healthcare staff, who was on the front line of this battle. This goes together with the tattered hospital and clinical equipment used extensively during this pandemic. The second issue appearing is the workload of postponed healthcare procedures. Due to beds being staffed with COVID patients, a lot of treatments like cancer or cardiovascular procedures have been postponed. What is more, the upcoming economic recession, together with pandemic contamination, will undoubtedly continue to leave an impact on the physical and mental health of healthcare workers. The COVID pandemic will have a longer-term impact on healthcare systems that should be addressed by political and healthcare authorities. In upcoming years, it is forecasted that non-communicable diseases will continue to rise and will account for 75% of all deaths in 2030. Nevertheless, it is mental health which is going to become the leading cause of morbidity and mortality globally by 2030. Now let's ask ourselves, how will healthcare systems which are already in financial burdens reform and improve their ability to handle unforeseeable large-scale health crises in the future, while still remaining sustainable? There is a way to support those systems and help them in their post-COVID recovery. We can release the burden of work and post-COVID mental and physical trauma partially with the use of new technologies. One of those is the power of lighting. Lighting is an important consideration for medical professionals caring for patients, but it can also affect patients' ability to heal. What's more, specific areas in hospitals require specific types of lighting to ease the job for healthcare workers, which sometimes is a matter of life and death. Appropriate lighting can limit staff fatigue as well, regulate their day-night rhythm, or in some cases even relieve them from migraines. Help us to transform healthcare systems for the better. Help us support the heroes of today.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to some of you. I hope you are excited to join our seminar, and I just wanted to mention that we at Signify take healthcare very seriously. We base our innovation on research and development efforts, and we have an extensive work done for already over than 100 years. We do have broad expertise in healthcare environments, light and health, also mining our legacy, being one company with Philips. We also invest significantly into healthcare knowledge, and we collaborate with professionals in healthcare industry across the globe. What we offer is a result of this in research and development activities and broad collaboration. And basically, we are offering an extensive range of solutions for various types of applications in healthcare facilities. It can be a small public hospital which is looking for robust, affordable solutions. And it could be a private clinic, or it could be a big medical center that requires the full infrastructure upgrade. We have it all in our portfolio, starting with small, affordable, quality solutions, going up and beyond illumination, and providing bioadaptive solutions for environmental monitoring, and even enabling your digital infrastructure using lighting as a backbone for IoT solutions. For example, you can enable indoor navigation with lights from Signify. You can enable real-time location services just by adding an add-on for lighting fixture with a gateway to support indoor navigation, basically contributing to the digitalization of your infrastructure through existing backbone from lighting. And then basically, with all of these solutions, we are aiming to address the key challenges that we see happening and affecting healthcare systems today. So with the growth of population, we also see a big trend of aging population that is more is impacted by climate changes. So we see a lot of fires today going across Europe, for example. We see heavy rains, we see temperature changes. All of that has an impact immediately on a human body. The cardiovascular diseases, various allergies, all of chronic diseases are going to be basically ignited with these changes. And due to that, there is a higher demand for healthcare. On the other side, I think all of us could recognize that there is significant staff shortage, the budget constraints, and all the infrastructure itself, also mentioned in the video, was impacted by the COVID. Now, how do we bring it to the next level? How do we actually enable access to healthcare, and how do we help patients heal faster, have better environment for our staff, that everybody feels safe and gets actually out of the hospital faster, right? So I would like to introduce my colleague, Alex, who worked on a very exciting project in Australia. So Alex, a word to you.
Morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone on the call. It's a pleasure to be here and honored to be able to introduce this topic. So I was brought to the project by our healthcare global division in Signify, and I had the pleasure to work alongside Professor John Fraser and Oystein Tronstand on the ICU of the Future project. So I'll give the word to them so they can explain how we went through this amazing journey and we achieved what they were expecting to achieve. Thank you. Word to you, John.
Alex, thank you very much. On behalf of myself and Stein, we're delighted to be part of this, and Signify have been great partners to work with us. And what Alina quite rightly says is a key area. Lighting as an intensive care professor is not part of my daily ward round routine, but as we sit here, whether it's in Europe, North America, Australia or Asia, we look outside the window and it's the light that affects us, whether it's evening time and Stein, who's from Norway, thinks of going to drink a beer, or if you're in Italy and you're thinking of having a cappuccino, we are controlled by light in some shape or form in the normal world. And when we become to our sickest, and that's in intensive care where myself and Stein work, that lighting is still just as important. So we're going to talk to you about a very special project, which is kind of different. We're in a big critical care research group here. We ran a huge COVID program across 67 countries. We developed bionic hearts. But as a personal note, my father was in intensive care, ventilated, and I realised that we could do better. It wasn't all just about surviving. Patients had to survive, sure, but we want them to thrive. And this is a key component of what myself and Stein, who's the lead physio in the hospital and should take the most credit for this project. He's run it as part of his PhD, as well as a full-time project manager, as well as a pile of young children. We wanted to give our patients a better future because 1 in 2 of us will end up at some point in our life in intensive care. So if there's 80 people on this call, 40 of us will end up in intensive care. We obviously want to survive, but we want that survival to be worthwhile. So I'll tell you a little bit about the group first and then tell you about the projects, and Stein will take it from there and explain what we've actually been doing at that time. So our group, as I say, is multinational. At the moment, we have 26 nationalities based here in Brisbane, in the north of Australia, in Queensland. And it's not just medics or physios or nursing staff. We've got scientists. We develop bionic hearts. We develop inhalable EpiPens, if you like, and we work a lot with industry. But what's key is not the people that are in our team. What's key is the people we work for, and they are universally our patients, whether that's in the cell lab, the animal lab, the engineering lab, or projects like the living lab, the ICU of the future, to improve the outcome of our patients so that they have a worthwhile life, and the distress that we put them through in critical illness is worthwhile because we give them a great outcome. And this project is a very, very big part of it. Critical illness, again, as Alina says, we've all realised during COVID that we are much more similar than we are different. And we have become a magnet for some of the best and brightest from around the world. And these are just some of our fellows here, and we hope to attract some Russians to the lab too. Soon we were discussing this, but very much we come together because as a team we are stronger together. So we do a lot of science and translational work with bionic hearts and lungs, with ECMO, the sickest of the sick. These are the people we work with. So the biology, the animal lab and the human lab. We also have an engineering lab and we work in the lab. And these are all types of different models that we can model and work out different modalities from a cellular perspective, for a treatment perspective. And, the number of models and the assessments that we can do here in this lab that we've grown. This is now our 20th year, and we're easily the largest of this type of lab in the Southern Hemisphere. Please feel free to take a scan of this QR code if you're interested in the other stuff, and this will give you a newsletter and you can read if you're interested. And now we're going to talk about the main purpose of today's talk. So the ICU of the future. Why is the ICU of the future important? Number one, there's two of us here, and one of us is going to end up in intensive care, so we want to make it better for ourselves, being entirely selfish. Number two, my father was ventilated in intensive care as a young doctor, and I realised that it was great that he survived intensive care, but he was left with substantial delirium. And I still have his notes 20 years later, 25 years later, about how distressing this was, and I gave it as a personal purpose for myself that I would try and do better for my dad and for your dads and your mums and your brothers and your sisters too. And this is the purpose behind this. So it's a moderately dramatic video, but I think if you ask anyone that's in intensive care, that's exactly what it can be like. It's a scary situation. You're at your weakest point. You're at your most likely place where you would die. It's scary for you if you're the patient, and it's equally scary for your relatives watching you in this really quite frightening, non-personalised, sterile environment. And this is what we came to. We work in Australia's largest cardiothoracic hospital, where our survival rates are fantastic, but the outcome of our patients perhaps are not as good as we'd like it to be. Because we see in Australia, which is only a population of 25 million, 150,000 patients per year. In Australia, this is $6,000 per day, so a vast cost. And this cost, again, as Alina says, will increase as our patient population gets older and they have more disease. And whilst we have great survival, the incidence of this condition called delirium is very, very high. And even myself as a professor of intensive care, or Stein as the head of physio, really didn't understand how big a problem this was until we started this project. So what is delirium? Delirium is reversible acute brain failure. It's not dementia. Dementia is a non-reversible chronic condition. Delirium could happen to you whether you're 30 or 40 or 50. And in the same way that your heart becomes dysfunctional or your lung becomes dysfunctional, your kidneys, the brain can become dysfunctional in intensive care. And it's got major sequelae. So the incidence of post-traumatic stress disorder, if you have intensive care delirium, is higher than that of a Vietnam veteran. So just think of how much we concentrate, absolutely appropriately, on veterans. But this condition has had such little attention. 1 in 3 will develop anxiety afterwards. Every second person will need to help returning to activities of daily living. And the entire family is affected by this condition. If you do get delirium, your chance of dying is doubled, 200%. your chance is 300% higher of dying in the first 6 months. You stay in hospital longer, you're sicker, it costs more, and the cost just in a small country like Australia with 25 million people, the cost that you can attribute to delirium is almost $10 billion. So it's a massive problem, and we aren't very good at treating it. So we know who gets delirium. The higher risk, if you're older, if you have simultaneous dementia, but it's entirely different. If you're severely ill, if you're on a life support machine. So basically, the sicker you are, the higher the risk of this other organ becoming dysfunctional. And we can't modify any of this. But what we can do is we can modify the environment. And we know that environment changes us. We're very fortunate. We live in Queensland with some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. And when you walk on a sunny beach, we can't help but smile. When it becomes dark, we go to sleep. When it becomes bright, our brains are activated to wake up. So we can modify things. The noise, and we're going to talk about the volume of noise, which is incredibly disturbing for our patients. The lighting, clearly, this is an audience that knows much more about this than we do. But we realized early on that this caused major problems with inability to sleep. The circadian rhythm, our day-night cycle, is incredibly connected since we were monkeys in the forest, is incredibly linked to their circadian rhythm. And the delirium problem, as we talked about as well, patients can't speak and they lose autonomy. And we used last year's technology in the intensive care. Some of our modalities are brilliant, our life support, the bionic hearts we're developing, but some of the modalities we're using have really not been changed for a long, long time. And patients tell us they start to feel not like an individual, but just as a puppet because of the sterility, and it feels very, very impersonal. And this could be our mum or our dad or ourselves. So we thought it doesn't have to be like this. We can make people feel personal, we can make them sleep, we can give them better conditions, but we have to work in the environment. A startling video, but all of those scenes are scenes that have been told to us by actual patients from our intensive care. And the horrible noise that you heard is a tiny percentage of what these patients, that was about, I think, 90 seconds, that video. This is the type of volume that our patients listen to hour in, hour out, day in, day out, week in, week out. So it's an incredibly confronting environment. And that's scary for the staff, but it's also a very difficult place for people to work. So intensive care nursing staff are the most well-trained nursing staff in the hospital. But they know that it's a difficult environment. And when patients become delirious, they become scared, they become frightened, and they're frequently violent to our nursing staff. So up to 99% of patients of staff in intensive care say they've experienced violence. This isn't because we've got bad people. This is because the patient thinks someone's trying to kill them or poison them, or that there's spiders crawling up their bed. So it's a major problem for our staff. And without staff, the intensive care closes. And when 1 in 2 of us need to go to intensive care, we need those nursing staff, we need those physios, we need those doctors. And these are all comments that our staff here have given us. We've been yelled at, punched at, bitten, ripping lines out, pulling the breathing tube out, abused. And the staff say this makes it difficult to want to come to work and to do the work well. And it's probably underreported. And you can imagine in your workplace, you go to work and perhaps you've got a teammate that you don't particularly like and it makes it difficult. Imagine that teammate starts biting you you can imagine that us trying to attract great nursing staff to the workforce is difficult. And we predicted, this is an external paper, 10 million staff workforce shortage by 2030, especially in the lower middle income countries. And this was before COVID. And now subsequent to COVID, these are the rates of illness of healthcare workers, PTSD, double that of a Vietnam vet. Depression is rampant in the area. And the pandemic just made it worse. The risk of infection, we were coming to work without a vaccine, coming every day to work. We were very fortunate in Queensland, we didn't have much, but the rest of you across the world had a huge, and your doctors and nursing staff went into work without a vaccine, knowing they put themselves in risk, in harm's way of infection, but also physical violence. And it's hardly surprising, therefore, in one paper recently, it suggested that almost 2/3 of crit care nursing staff are thinking of resigning within 3 years. It takes us 10 years really to get a junior nurse up to an excellent ICU nurse. So this environment, the lighting, the noise, will massively impact not just the number of patients we have now, but as Alina says, as we move forward and patients become older, it's going to impact it even worse. So this is not just important to our patients, but to our staff and backwards. So medicine is a nice dynamic field, and that's why we both enjoy it, and that's what our research is about, because things progress over timelines. But if we look at how things have developed, if you look at what the phone looked like in 1876, when a Scotsman, just to be clear, Alexander Graham Bell, invented the first telephone, this is what it looked like in 1876. We look at Steve Jobs' iPhone, and this is now almost 20 years ago, it's changed immeasurably. So things develop at a tremendous rate of knots. But if we look at what the ward used to look like in 1865, it was an open room, there was a curtain or so between the beds, there was a window perhaps if you were lucky, but it was always away from the patient. And if you look at the intensive care now, there's lots of machines that make lots and lots of noise, they keep patients alive, but it's pretty much the same thing. The window's behind the patient, there's magical curtains that are meant to stop noise, light, infection going through. So we really have not kept up with this. And innovation that's happened outside of the hospital has not been translated to inside of the hospital. So this is where our project concept come in. We know that we're not doing it well enough. We know our survival is fantastic, but this problem of delirium, this problem of patients being distressed and the long-term sequelae are massive. And I'm going to pass over to Stein, who's been leading this project for the last 3 or 4 years. Stein.
Thank you, John. So that's really the background of the project. So then the question was, what can we actually do and where do you start? Because there are so many things to address. And the key thing from our point of view is, what is the actual problem and whose problem is it? Because if you look at ICU design historically or hospital design, it's generally architects, builders. They have a certain set budget. You might get senior staff involved, but the end user, the patients, have never really been consulted or been part of the process. And so we wanted this project to be about the patients and ensuring that the problems are based on their needs so we can find appropriate solutions for them. So we started the project by interviewing patients, family members, then we interviewed staff about their experience working in ICU, and obviously we went to the literature and we did lots of baseline studies just to work out what the actual problem is. So patients are telling us that the care provided is excellent, no complaints about that. Everyone is very grateful to be alive, and that's what everyone told us. But when you start scratching the surface a little bit more and ask them about their real experience, they start telling a few other experiences, and they start telling us that ICU for patients is very different to what it is for staff. Staff, it's a safe environment. It's a stressful environment at times, but it's safe. For patients, it was quite a traumatic environment that actually potentially caused harm. And instead of me telling you about it, I got one of our patients who...
I had a heart transplant, and after that, ICU was probably the scariest place I've ever been. It just played around with my head a lot, the noises and the visions of dark figures and just scary things. When you think of a horror movie, like shadows and scary faces, that was pretty much my head. When you're in it at the time, it just feels incredibly real. You can't snap out of it. And I'd hear voices of people in my room, and I'd open my eyes and there was no one in there. I had no sleep. They were giving me medication to sleep because I just couldn't sleep. And there were days where nights that I just didn't want to go to sleep because I knew that I'd have nightmares. ICU is just a really daunting memory for me in my whole entire journey with my transplant. So it's definitely something that's carried on into, my life now, like having post-traumatic stress and anxiety and stuff like that. I still have nightmares now. So it is something that I've carried on, not meaning to, but I have.
So this interview was done 4 or 5 years after she had her heart transplant, and we all thought this was a fantastic success. Young lady, heart and lung transplant, survived, left ICU, did really well, but we didn't really know about any of these problems until 4 or 5 years later. She's still having nightmares. She still cries when she hears anything that sounds like an alarm, and she doesn't want to come back to ICU again, despite the fact that she will need another transplant in the future. So John mentioned some of the issues, so let's have a look at some of the issues in more detail. We mentioned that ICUs are noisy. How noisy are they? Well, the daytime noise levels is similar to putting an ICU bed next to a busy freeway. So it sits at about 60 to 65 decibel. And these are our sickest patients. So we know how important a quiet, peaceful place is when we get sick. We just want to curl up in a dark, quiet room. And this is where we put our sickest patients. At nighttime, it's a lot quieter on average, but the peak noise levels are still really high, with multiple peak noise levels above 80 decibel, which is similar to a lawnmower operating very close by. So it's not really a great environment for patients to rest and recover. Part of the problem is that the vast majority of equipment that makes noise are situated right around the patient's head. You have all your infusion pumps, you have your mechanical ventilator, the monitors, and all of these deliver lots of alarms. They're obviously essential, but they deliver alarms right next to the patient's head, despite the fact that the alarms are there to notify caregivers of an issue. They're not there to notify the patients. And as just an example, this is one of our patients, and all of these equipment here deliver alarms and other mechanical noises day and night. But obviously alarms are essential. So, essential alarms are critical because they keep the patients alive. So if all the alarms were important, it wouldn't be much of an issue, I suppose, or we couldn't do anything about it. But we looked at local data just to try to quantify the problem. For 1 month, there were 600 alarms just from one piece of equipment, so just the monitors, which equates to each monitor starting a new alarm every 88 seconds, day and night. Every 88 seconds, a new monitor alarm goes off. And unfortunately, of those 600,000 alarms, 5% were actioned, and the rest were not actioned and therefore unnecessary. So every 90 seconds, there's a very loud noise going off next to the patient's head. And it really disturbs and frightens the patients. And for staff, we mainly ignore them because they're not critical. From a lighting point of view, and again, we're not the experts, you guys are the expert on this, but we know how important light is, as John mentioned, especially for maintaining circadian rhythms. We've all evolved around natural light, and the lights in ICU, unfortunately, don't deliver the light that we need. We know that the intensity is wrong, the timing, the color temperature, everything is wrong. And they're basically on when staff press the on button and off when we press it off. During the day, there's not enough light for the patients to read, and at night time, or to maintain circadian rhythms, and at night time, it's too bright for them to sleep. And even though we have windows, they're usually behind the patients, and we're not utilizing that natural light because we know how important natural light hitting the patient's retinas are for maintaining circadian rhythms, which impacts on the patient's quality and quantity of sleep. They sleep on average 3 to 5 hours per day, not per night, but that's per day. More concerningly is that quality of the sleep. It's broken sleep. Patients' sleep are disturbed every 5 to 10 minutes on average, according to some studies. Some of them are due to patient care activities. Some of them are essential. Again, some of them are more routine based. But the sleep is highly fragmented. People don't get the REM sleep, and therefore the healing qualities of sleep are lost as well. And we talked about the alarms and the noise and the equipment, but also staff contribute towards the lack of sleep that our patients are getting.
Got my x-ray, got my IV antibiotics, now I can finally get some sleep. What is that? Sir, you need to keep your arms straight. Like this the whole night? Or it'll keep beeping and you won't get your antibiotics.
We have a rapid response in room 302.
What is that? It's time for your midnight vitals. Why do I need midnight vitals? Doctor's orders. This is giving me a headache. Would you like me to ask the doc for a Tylenol? Or why not? Got your Tylenol here. What? Just let me sleep. Okay. All right, sir, it's time to draw your blood. It's 3 a.m. Uh-huh. Hey, sir, I'm John, the medical student. How was your night? I'm fine. Hey there, sir, I'm Dr. Smith, the intern. Are you doing okay? Stop. I'm gonna go get my senior. Sir, I'm Dr. Jones. Can you follow my finger? Sure. Look at the light. What day is it? Tuesday or... Wait. He doesn't know what day it is. Yesterday was... Was he like this last night? He was more awake earlier in my shift. I'm ordering a stat CT head. No, just let me sleep. We did good work in there, team.
And for those of you who have either worked in a hospital or been in a hospital, unfortunately, you know that this is not an uncommon. So that's, I guess, the problems. Can this be fixed? Because it's been known for quite a while that noise and light, for instance, are essential. If you go back to Hippocrates, he talked about the importance of all of these things. Florence Nightingale, 150 years ago, talked about how detrimental noise was to the patients. So we've been aware of this for a long time. So is it actually possible to do anything about it? And how can you address it in such a complex environment such as ICU? So there were some of the challenges that we faced when we started this project. So this project had been going on for the last 5 years, and we did actually implement and rebuild 2 bed spaces late last year, and we're now in the evaluation phase because we've shown that we can implement and build the 2 bed spaces, and we're now looking at the actual outcomes and how it impacts on patients. As mentioned at the start, we built it around the needs of the people who spend most time in the bed spaces, the patients, the family. And we utilized a core design approach, so we actually put former patients in the same room as industry partners, so everyone can hear the stories of what it's like to be in ICU and also what happens to people after they leave ICU. So builders, architects, tech companies, etc., can then start listening to these stories and then start building solutions around the needs of the patients. And interestingly enough, all the collaborators we had in the same room, none of them had ever spoken to any of the patients previously, despite having designed ICU equipment or ICU wards or built hospitals for many, many years. As John mentioned, technology moves forward very quickly. If you look at noise, for instance, we're moving rapidly from today's situation towards a more quiet ICU and then the silent ICU solutions, which doesn't indicate completely silent ICU, more just silent alarms or alarms sent directly to caregivers. We know that new lighting solutions are available, and we know that there's evidence starting to come out about how that impacts on patients positively. For bed spaces without the window, you don't need to just have bland walls. You can create views, whether that's through an artificial skylight, virtual windows. You can actually engage the patient and allow virtual visiting. As John mentioned, I'm Norwegian. I can talk to my family in Norway all the time using my phone, using various apps. But as soon as if I entered ICU, I wouldn't be able to speak to anyone outside of ICU because we disabled that kind of technology. So people lose connectivity with family, friends, the outside world, even though we know how important that is for their recovery and well-being. So we went through various design iterations. Can we optimize the ICU design from simple physical barriers stopping noise through to the more common or current ICU designs towards more sort of futuristic options, just to see how we could look at ICU design differently rather than just tweak existing designs. How can we actually completely reconceptualize ICU care and ICU delivery through the environment? We were given 2 bed spaces in our ICU to upgrade, and these are the photos of them beforehand. Internal ICUs, no windows, no views, deep dark corner of the ICU, used for simulation training. So this was our starting point, and this is what it looked like at the end of the build. Once the slide come up, you'll see what we've done. But we've completely redesigned, reconceptualized, and rebuilt these 2 bed spaces, addressing all the problems that
This is what it's about. That young lady at the end had a heart-lung transplant as well. We want them to survive, but we want them to be going back to being able to run through the forest, the beautiful lakesides of Queensland, not to be lying in bed crying under a cover. And that's unfortunately what happens. So with Stein and with Alex and Signify and many others, we have developed this. This is no longer an idea. This is no longer an academic pitchy concept, but this is something that we are treating patients in. And some of the really simple things we could do was, intensive cares have been developed initially from operating theatres. In the operating theatre, the anaesthetist stands at the top of the bed, the surgeon is doing the cutting, and the anaesthetist controls the monitor that's beside the anaesthetist, the ventilator, the infusion bumps. And when we created intensive care in the 1970s, we just transferred this from the operating theatre into the intensive care. So all this noise sits, as you can see, beside the patient's head, 95%. So just by throwing the sound from the monitor beside the patient's bed that the patient can change to a downstream monitor nearer the nurse, we can manage to drop the loudness of the alarm by 50%. This is a major problem. There you can look at the monitor display, 50% reduced just by moving the monitor. Such a simple thing. But imagine having your child cry at half the volume, or the car or the party outside your house going at half the volume. So we managed to drop it by just simple things, and we've failed to do this up until now because the volume that's around the bedside is just so loud. And we've managed to change the areas. What we've got at the moment is changing the areas and reducing the bed sound so that the patients can actually get partial, decent night's sleep. Lighting, and again, it's fantastic to work with your company. So intensive care, 1 in 2 people, but so little we know about it. So we worked with a group of engineers from Queensland University of Technology. We measured the normal daylight wavelengths over a number of different days. And these are the wavelengths that we see from morning up to peaking in the afternoon and going away through the daytime. So this is the way that our brains have developed over the last 40 million years. We're asleep at the start of the day and at the end of the day if you're lucky, unless you're an intensivist. But in the middle of the day, you're wide awake because the light is fantastic quality. But what do we give our patients? The people are absolutely dependent on circadian rhythm. And we know what it's like when we've got a cough or a cold or swine flu. We want to go to sleep. And light is such a key component. And this is the lighting that our patients see. This is, again, we measured this with the engineers. This is the waveform pattern in nanometers that the actual patient sees here. Completely different from the way we have developed and way we've evolved. So then the question, I guess, is, well, but what if we have a window? We've seen a lot of windows in these shots, and these are the good intensive care beds. But the window's normally behind the patient. And if you have the window, full Australian bright sunshine, and the lights, the wavelength patterns are almost identical, because the intensity of the light coming from the ceiling and the fact that the window is behind the patient means that they essentially see the exact same stuff and they don't get any benefit from the windows. And working, and this is in no way an advert for your company, but measuring using the same technology, this is the circadian lighting that we're seeing with the programming that we've done with Stein, Alex and Signify team. Not perfect by any manner of means, and we're working on this blue light area here to get it more similar. But you can understand that this is a pattern that says to your brain, it's daytime, it's afternoon, and it's nighttime. And this is what we want to get. So we'll stop here. I'm happy to take questions. But what we're trying to do here is remember that our patients are our mums, they're our dads. We shouldn't just call them patients. We should call them our family. And we should only give care to these people that we would be happy to give to our family. We want to see the patients thrive, not just survive. We want to see relatives not be scared and petrified. We want to see our nursing staff want to come to work. We want them not to be harmed. We want them not to resign. We want them not to turn over. And with this, yes, these lights are a little bit more expensive. Yes, our ICU of the future is a little bit more expensive. But we've already done a healthcare cost analysis that if, and we've been very, very conservative about our estimates, if the whole package of care that we've developed, and this is really it, it's a bundle of care, the whole bundle of care that we've developed, if it reduces the rate of delirium by even 10 or 20%, This ICU of the future bed space will pay for itself entirely within the next 2.5 years, just from patient flow in the hospital. And then those massive cost savings, reduced length of stay in the hospital, ability to go back to work, lack of PTSD, less psychological input. So this has long-reaching ramifications that we hope that with the work that we've done here, and we're talking on behalf not just of Stein, who's led the project, to myself, who conceived of it, but also the patients' families, the patients themselves, their families, and all the other people, and our partners in this research project, the common good and the critical care. And we're happy to take questions with that. Again, if you'd like to scan, there's some nice media on this. If you want to scan the QR code, there's a couple of videos and things that give you a bit more in depth.